'Tis the season to be jolly, but for a lot of people this time of year, the only thing that they feel is the blues. Seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, is a medical condition that affects millions. Dr. Mark Meier is here now with some advice on how to deal with the bah humbug. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk about it. What is seasonal affective disorder?
Well, it's a cyclical condition that impacts people generally at this time of year. People who live north of the equator, for the further north, the more prevalent. And it's associated with the fact that it gets dark here awful early. And people, when it's cold, when it's winter, they're just not up to doing things that they normally do.
Okay, well, so what are some of the signs? If folks are sitting at home going, maybe I've got that, what should they be looking for?
Well, seasonal affect disorder looks a lot like depression, and it is a subset of depression. When you start to have things where you're lethargic and you notice that your mood is down and you have no energy, your appetite changes. One of the things that's very common with seasonal affective disorder is people crave carbohydrates. And they start to eat the sugars, and they stop getting out, and they feel down. It feels like depression.
Yeah, so that's kind of a self-defeating type of thing. You know, again, some of the causes of this might be?
Well, our theories are that really light is the issue. And with the lack of sunlight that we have here in Minnesota, your melatonin is impacted, and so that disrupts your sleep cycle. And then your serotonin is impacted, which impacts your mood. And so the theories are that without adequate light, without adequate interactions and time out with one another or exercising, people really start to struggle with the depression.
Okay, so let's talk about the treatments now. So let's say I've got it, and by the way, I do suffer from this, and you and I were talking about this ahead of time. I actually up my vitamin D intake, and I try to make sure that I do the exercise.
The exercise.
So, you know, so what are the treatments? Let's talk about that.
Well, one of the best things you can do is light therapy. We do know that light therapy works. And, you know, even when you get outdoors here in Minnesota at this time of year, the sun is so far away, you're not getting the benefit of the vitamin from the sun. So light therapy is critical. Exercise. When, excuse me, at this time of year when it's cold and it's dark and your intuition is to crawl up and go to bed at 6 or 7 o'clock, you know, you have to fight those urges, and you have to exercise. And to continue to socialize and to stay active. In its severest cases, antidepressants might be indicated. But there's some questions about how they work in such a short-term issue.
But if you go to your physician, you're going to work through all the rest of those things, and antidepressants or a prescription for it, I would think would be the last thing. Only because if you can, I would think a lot of people would be treated, or would be helped by, when you talk about light therapy, that's literally having like a box of light next to you, either when you wake up in the morning. One of the people that we work with here, actually Cindy Chapman, who used to be our executive producer, she has a box light sitting on her desk.
And light therapy is something that generally you need to just be exposed to 20-25 minutes a day. And it's direct light, and there's lots of good products out there. Counseling and some coping techniques to get through this time of year. The exercise, absolutely, and staying connected with people that care about you, and admitting to other people that you're having some troubles can be very helpful.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Again, light therapy, counseling, exercise, and if you need to, talk to your doctor about the antidepressants.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you so much. Well, up next, a sci-fi blockbuster hits the big screen. We're going to get the real review on the most expensive movie ever made, and they're hoping to turn it into box. Well, depression and anxiety are two major causes of death and illness in the United States, and they can reduce quality of life and worsen chronic diseases. Now, the CDC says 20% of Americans can have depression all of their life, and it affects more women than men, but there is hope. Mark Meier of Equalicare, and you are a University of Minnesota professor. You're joining us now to explore this issue. Let's talk about first the pain of depression. What is that?
Well, depression is very real, and it impacts people on both a physical and emotional level. Depression robs people of their ability to feel happy, to feel joy. It certainly impacts their ability to enjoy activities, and there's physical pain associated with depression. Quite frequently, there's stomach problems and headaches and other unexplained pains. It's a very real illness that impacts, as you said, men and women, and we tend to hear of women more, but that's because men tend to underreport it, don't want to admit it, and it's often overlooked.
And you're thinking actually some of those years down the line here, we're going to see those numbers be a little bit more equal just because the reporting of it is going to get higher for men.
I think as we become more attuned to it in men, we certainly will see an increase in the rate of depression.
Okay, seeking relief from depression for some folks not they don't choose the best options for them. So
Absolutely. Well, the natural response to being in pain is that you want to get out of pain. And the emotional pain associated with depression is very severe and very profound. And others don't see that. If you have a broken leg, I'm in crutches, I'm on a cast. So people who are depressed due to stigma and shame often turn to unhealthy ways of coping with their depression, such as drugs and alcohol.
And so obviously not the best choices for them. But do people who suffer from depression, are they more likely to seek self-medication that's not maybe as healthy for them?
Frequently. We see this all the time, that individuals before coming out to get actual treatment for their depression are using alcohol or using drugs. It's a way to numb themselves out. It's very ineffective. Depression or alcohol is a depressant, makes your depression worse, and certainly drugs and alcohol abuse carry lots of other problems. When you come down from a high, you may have criminal problems, legal problems, etc. So it's not the way to deal with depression.
So sometimes when they are going to alcohol, once they go through a treatment program or cleaned up, they still haven't addressed the issue of depression.
That's absolutely the case in some instances.
So what are good coping strategies for someone who's sitting at home watching us right now who thinks either I know somebody that might be depressed or they themselves are depressed?
Well, the first thing is to recognize it and to understand that it's a real illness and that it's okay to get treatment. And then what you need to do is talk to somebody, a mental health professional, your physician, somebody you trust who has some knowledge, who can tell you what the signs, what the symptoms are. Think about the effective strategies such as perhaps medication, counseling, exercise, diet, sleep. All of those very critical things are things you need to look at before you would ever think of numbing yourself out with drugs or alcohol.
Now, is this a systemic situation, meaning is this something you inherited, or is this something that just it's happened to you and now what do we do?
Well, it can be the result of many things. Certainly genetics play a role, and we know that individuals who come from families with depression are at a greater risk. Certainly trauma can be related to depression. Chronic illnesses, for example. Lots of folks with Parkinson's, MS, or other chronic illnesses suffer from depression. And depression can be, the onset can be for no known reason. Sometimes folks just get it. We're learning about this.
Well, and we talked, when you were here a couple of weeks ago, we talked about seasonal affective disorder, which can kind of play a role maybe in just feeling bad about this time of year. But that may be something as easy as taking either more vitamin D or having a light. What we're talking about with chronic depression and anxiety, that's probably more of something that you would need to go to a physician and maybe get a long-term solution.
Absolutely. You want to craft a plan. Depression can resolve on its own, and sometimes after 10, 12 months it will do so. The problem is in those intervening 10, 12 months, people are living in misery and having lots of problems. So yes, you need a plan.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. We
Thank you.
really appreciate it, Mark. Well, just ahead, healthy, budget-friendly shopping. Where to find bargain prices on fresh produce and organic foods. Just ahead.
Kare 11 News in high definition, brought to you by